Sometimes it's fear from the mom's point of view. She starts getting tensed up and things just stop moving. That's why labor can often get stalled, or what they call failure to progress. So
Mhm.
those are the things that I'm trying to help with to avoid any
Mhm.
of those kind of bad situations coming up.
Hi, welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk About This. I am your host, Crystal Hicks. My guest today is Sharon McDermott, is a licensed acupuncturist, and she's also a herbalist and certified birth doula. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Sharon McDermott. What is the difference between having a midwife and having a birth doula? What is the difference?
And so a midwife is, she's a highly trained, or he's a highly trained medical professional, much like an OBGYN. They can do a lot of things like, obviously, they see you as a patient in the office, and also they can do births in the hospital. They also can do a births at home. They don't do certain medical procedures like surgeries, because that's something that an OBGYN would do. They're more mother-centered, I would say, than an OBGYN is, meaning they're trying to accommodate mom as much as possible, and trying to do less medical intervention. A birth doula is somebody who is more like a layperson, or they could be trained like me in some way in a medical profession, but they don't have to have medical skills. In fact, we don't do anything like any medical procedures or skills like taking blood pressure, or any of that. We leave that to the nursing or medical staff. What we
Okay.
do is we help advocate for mom and dad, or whoever it may be, the partner, to see what their wishes are in terms of what they want for birth. The other thing we do is we help physically let them
Mhm.
move around certain positions to help them labor.
Right.
With my background in acupuncture, I can do acupressure points
Mhm.
um, on certain parts of the body that really help move through the contractions.
Right.
Also, on the hips, like doing hip squeezes, and I also do essential oils. So there's different things that we can do to help mom labor,
Mhm.
because we know labor takes time. It's a process. We're describing about in your experience. First of all, they don't necessarily like shave or do enemas so much anymore. And midwives, again, can work in both either hospital or at home.
Mhm.
And the thing that has changed is what you're getting to, is the fact that the way that they're doing it in hospitals has changed. The time when had taken, had been in the hospital, I had my son in 1999, so we're moving a couple of years more than from when you did.
Mhm.
I originally had a midwife, but I ended up having to have cesarean. So, and they do keep you in the hospital for a certain number of days just to check out to make sure you and the baby are fine. They do put you in one room, like you said, generally for the birth, and then they move you to a separate room postpartum, to a different room in the hospital after.
Mhm.
They're much more aware now of postpartum issues, depression, things like that, and also other physical issues that could come up after the birth. But yeah, sometimes they're not maybe following up maybe as closely as could be, because they are pushing you out of the hospital, depending on, again, what's happening, usually, 2 to 3 days after. I would say 2 days is normal for a vaginal birth, but it
Mhm.
could be, if you have the baby or you have complications, they'll keep you in longer, obviously, because they need to monitor you.
Mhm.
Um, and I've had the experience of both being at, mostly, of course, hospital births, but I did also get to experience some home births, and it's a vastly different experience. Women are just, the reason why I got into that was just because I wrote this book. And prior to that, I got into being a doula because I do a lot of fertility treatment in my office as an acupuncturist and herbalist. And then I also work with women while they're pregnant. And a lot of those ladies just stay with me through the whole pregnancy. But then I wasn't really seeing the baby at the end. So I wanted to kind of complement that with becoming a birth doula. And
Mhm.
then there's a little bit of work to get through to actually be certified. So you have to do some reading, and you have to have a certain number of births. Um, and we have a really great association here on Long Island that supports that. And they even sort of help get us jobs. I mean, you have to be interviewed, obviously, by the mom to get the job, but they'll have applicants, that will be requesting a doula. So that's a really great thing because it's a kind of a support. And then we also have a fund for women who cannot afford it, at Long Island Doula Association. That's the group. And I've also worked with some of those women. And so in my book, I decided to talk about why I was seeing, particularly in hospitals, women not feeling empowered to birth. And also, even in pregnancy, they don't feel confident that they can get through it, and managing, the discomfort. Or some people have great pregnancies; they don't really have an issue, but other do. And again, I'm dealing a lot of times with high risk women, so they're getting a lot more like sonograms and maybe other interventions because they need to be watched closely. So there's a lot of moving parts, and trying to get them to understand that they do have like patient rights and they can ask questions. And like the first question you asked me, I would tell them, that's what I wrote in the book. I would tell them to understand who these people are that they're going to visit. What does an OB do? Ask some questions. What does a midwife do? Why would maybe you want a midwife instead of an OB? Who's a reproductive endocrinologist if you're working on fertility issues? Who's for men, urologist, and some other people, and of course me, as a doula, and any other auxiliary people that you might be working with, and to find out how they can help you. Really, you're kind of building a team of medical providers, so that you have that in place way before you go to the hospital. The other part is some doctors kind of poo-poo having a what they call birth plan, because they're like, well, how do you know? You don't know what's going to happen. But
Right.
to me, it's more of an advocacy plan. So you're going to know what things you were willing to ask for, what procedure may come up that they're going to ask you about, and then you can make a decision. Because once you're in labor and you're in that time period, you don't have time to think. All you're thinking
Right.
about is the next contraction. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
So you can't be making any kind of decisions like that when you go into the hospital. That has to be done way before. So that's where, we can help with that. And that's where I come in when something comes up. A mom is saying, oh, I'm starting to feel a lot of pressure and I don't know. And I'm like, okay, because sometimes the nurses will come in and, do you want that epidural? Do you want that epidural now?
Yeah.
That's not really helpful because they're not giving you any information as to, well, why you keep asking me that. I want that. I mean, they kind of see that you're in
pain.
In
Yeah.
pain. And this, remember, I also try to tell women that this is a pain that's not going to last forever. It's generally 12 to 24 hours. And it doesn't have to be as painful if your mind and your body are connected and you're calm, and maybe you're doing some hypnobirthing, you're doing meditation, whatever that thing is. I mean, yes, I'm not going to say there's not pain, but you can minimize that by doing all these things. I'm going to do the pressure points with you. All of this is going to be helpful to get through, and it's going to ease you. Your body's going to relax. Obviously, you're going to be more open down there. I also work on the jaw because they have a connection. The jaw is connected in a way down there to the cervix. Like if you're tightening up, then everything else is going to tighten up.
Yeah.
So, there's like a lot of different things we can work on, and that's all got to be kind of planned somewhat as to what you're willing to do before you go into the hospital. And then of course a home birth is totally different because you're in your own environment. You get to control your environment. You really have very little control over the hospital environment.
That's
But you
true.
can do things like say, I don't want a lot of people coming in and out of the room. I don't want any interns. I don't turn the lights off. I don't want the lights on. I want intermittent fetal monitoring. I don't want the fetal monitor on me, if possible, all the time. Like, women don't know that they can ask for these things, and it's within your right to ask for that. Doesn't matter if it's like, oh, we must have that monitor on. That's one of the reasons why women are kind of like thrown in the bed and like, no, we got to keep you there because that is like the worst thing for labor. You can't do anything. If you're not moving around, you're not moving labor. You're not moving things along.
Right.
That's why labor can often get stalled, or what they call failure to progress. Sometimes it's fear from the mom's point of view. She starts getting tensed up and things just stop moving. So those are the things that I'm trying to help with to avoid any of those kind of bad situations coming up.
So you kind of prep the person
Yeah.
before they go into actual labor. So you help them from the beginning and postpartum
Yes, yes,
pregnancy as
definitely.
well. And that's
So,
I'm glad that you're talking about this because, I know when I was giving birth to my children in the mid 80s, uh, they didn't, like you said, we wasn't informed about stuff like this. We wasn't educated as to whether or not I know having a midwife. I didn't even know what a midwife was when I was giving birth. I just know it was somebody in the room with me helping me push this baby out.
mhm.
Because I had one son. Both of my kids were natural. I had one that was 9 pounds and 4 ounces, which
Wow.
was my son. I don't know how I had him natural without no stitches. My first birth with
And you
my
didn't
daughter,
probably have an epidural either because they didn't have, did you have an epidural of any
I
kind?
had yeah, I do remember. Well, when my daughter was born in 85, she was 7 pounds and 4 ounces. I do remember having an epidural with her
Mhm.
because her head was leaning up against my spine, which
Okay.
was causing me to have a lot of lower back pain. So
Hmm.
they did give me epidural with her. I'm not sure with my son, but I did have both kids natural. My son was bigger. I didn't have any stitches with him. He was just plain. I don't know how I did that. I kept telling them to cut me because this kid don't want to come out. He's too big. He's just laying here and he don't want to do anything. But afterwards, I remember that you didn't have much postpartum care
Hmm.
back then.
Yeah.
Now, does the insurance company cover this, cover you, like
No,
pay for a person who's
no,
no, they don't?
no, it's not covered. So, obviously for some people it's a luxury. That's why I said we have a special, we have a special program for women. They have to qualify, obviously, financially as to what their income is. But no, it's not covered by insurance. And basically anything that's natural and good for you is normally not covered by insurance. I mean, I am
Mm-hmm.
a licensed acupuncturist, and I do get coverage for, there is some coverage, but no, doulas
Mm-hmm.
do not get covered. But I want to just go back to one thing you said,
Mm-hmm.
because the fact that you had a midwife was good, especially for a larger baby, because yes, you said cut to get you going to get the baby out, but midwives also have ways of helping, and some nurses do too, to ripen the cervix and to get it to a place where you won't have any tearing. And maybe that's what she was doing. I don't know in your situation, because you
Mm-hmm.
said you didn't have any stitches, so she must have been, like lubricating the area or doing something, massaging to get you to be able to birth the baby without having a lot of trauma, which
Mm-hmm.
is not always the case. They end up with doing what you're talking about as an episiotomy.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes what happens is you have to cut part of the labial parts of the,
And
down there.
this was with my first child, my daughter. She was smaller. She was 7 pounds and 4 ounces,
Mhm.
and they did cut me with her. And I
Okay.
did have stitches with her. But what was unusual was my son was 9 pounds and 4 ounces, and they didn't cut me for him. Now, like I said, I had both kids natural. I didn't have any C-sections. But I was just like wondering why are they let me have this baby, this huge child, and they're
Hmm.
not, cutting me, for him to come out. Because I was having complications with him, coming out because he was so big.
Well,
But
maybe your midwives were skilled enough that they could figure out, how to do that. And of course, it was your second. So the birth canal is already a little more, it's more open. Your pelvis was probably a little bit more open. So it was actually better that the second time, maybe for you, that you had a bigger baby the second time.
mm-hmm,
I mean, not that I'm saying it was like, easy birth, but you know what I mean? So the pathway was already there.
right.
And so, that's, again, every birth could be different. One of the things that I see that's happening, I don't know, who you may be talking to, but here it's become a big business to also do induction, which is something where they are inducing labor medically.
Right.
Sometimes it's definitely necessary. I won't
Mm-hmm.
say that it isn't, but a lot of it is not.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the reasoning, and it's pretty clear really, is that hospitals want a system that works, and it's what I call, and there's a sociologist who came up with this, I didn't really come up with it, but it's called McDonaldization of industrialization. Like the medical system has become so industrialized, it's become so formulaic.
Mm-hmm.
You can't make a formula with birth. We don't know when it's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And everything is sort of more made as a convenience for the
For the
doctor and their
right.
processes in the hospital. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to pretty much adhere to that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm saying. When you do a home birth, it's very different because you're in your own environment. Granted, you will not get an epidural in a home birth, okay, because
Mm-hmm.
that is a medical procedure, basically a
Mm-hmm.
spinal tap, and then you won't be able to be walking around.
Right.
So it's totally different. You have to be in your power and you have to be confident, and that's mostly what I've seen with the women who do home birthing. I mean, not that they're, they of course they're concerned and everything. There's usually always a backup plan if there's a need to go to a hospital. Most midwives work, with an obstetrician or a hospital where they can admit a woman if there's some issues. But just seeing way too much of this type of intervention that's starting to happen with inductions. And by the way, you know, these estimated due dates are very incorrect. Only I read the statistic about 3% of births come on whatever that date is that is given.
Mm.
3%. That's it.
Mm.
So these are just guesses,
His estimate. Yeah.
Yeah. The only ones that are more accurate are women who are having an IVF procedure because they are joining the egg and the sperm outside of the body to grow,
Mm-hmm.
into a good embryo, and then they're putting that embryo back in. So at that point in time, we can kind of guess within a couple of days that if that baby starts to form, that would be,
Mm-hmm.
that would be a date. But other
Right.
than that, we don't know. So when they're saying, oh, we can induce you, your baby's full at 38 weeks, fully gestationally grown, is it? How do we know? We don't know that for sure.
That's
Um,
true.
and why would you want to do that? Baby's lungs are still forming, there's tissues still generating and things like
Mm-hmm.
that. So why? Just
Yeah.
just wait.
Yeah,
And
because they had to induce me with my son,
yeah,
because he was so big
yeah.
and he wouldn't come out. And then the next day they came into the room and they said, okay, you're going to have this baby today. So they induced my labor. And then I had to wait until, it was time to go ahead and give birth. But like you said, that's a natural thing. It's like they forcing you to do something that's natural.
That's right. Yeah. So just let mom's body, which it was built to do its thing. And, like, don't get in the way.
Right.
But like in your case, maybe they were concerned, and maybe there were some other, medical things going on, and they don't want the baby to get too big. If there's a fluid issue, in the, an amniotic sac or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
then maybe again, that could be warranted to do that.
Right.
It just depends. But I'm seeing a lot more what we would call elective, which means
Mm-hmm.
there's no medical reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
And women don't even know their rights. They're like, okay,
Right.
and well, maybe we could stop and think about this. Why do they actually really want to do it? Maybe because the doctor wants, to clear his schedule on a Friday afternoon or something. I don't know. But,
Mm-hmm.
it's for you to have the information so that you can make a good decision about it. But if you're not being, like you said, you're not provided with any information, how are you going to know that? You're not.
Right. Right. You're
You know?
right. Yeah, because once you once that water busts and you go into labor, you're not thinking about, who's going to be with me. And plus, if you're not educated to this stuff, I guess it's good to be educated before you actually have the labor, because that's the thing.
Absolutely.
Back in the 80s when I was giving birth, I wasn't even educated to a midwife. I just
Mhm.
knew she was there when I was
Mhm.
giving birth,
Right.
So
Yeah.
I guess it's good to know all these things before you actually give birth.
Yes, absolutely. And you were saying postpartum care. So, like in my instance, I stay with the mom about an hour or two after the baby is born to stay, and that's in the room where she gave birth. And then once generally after a certain amount of time, like 2 hours or so, she'll get transferred to a postpartum room. So I don't generally go with her then.
Mm-hmm.
But then what happens is I will come back to her at her home about a week later to check in with her to see, how's the breastfeeding going. I try to get the breastfeeding going in the hospital. Sometimes the nurses are also helping with that. breastfeeding is not like a given that people should, women should know how to do this either.
Mhm.
This is another whole thing. So baby is learning too. So baby's just sort of rooting around, trying to figure out, and then, maybe attaching, not attaching to the breast, it takes time. Everything
Right.
takes time. And again, in the hospital, it's just hurry up and do it.
Mhm.
So and of course, like I said, the hospital is watching for any signs postpartum. Mom will usually stay a couple of days, and then I come and do my thing, make sure that she is okay, and provide her resources if she's not. So I have people that she could reach out to for counseling or for lactation. We also have postpartum doulas who come in and help specifically mom with breastfeeding and also light duties in the house to help them, because basically all you're doing is, you're sleeping, eating with that baby. That baby gets up, you got to feed that baby every couple of hours if you're breastfeeding.
Right.
Um, if you're not, and you're doing formula feeding, it's a little bit longer, but still, you're not getting a whole lot of rest. So it's great to have, if you can afford it, to have a postpartum person come in, or maybe you have a relative that can come in who
Mhm.
has them, a woman has breastfed, and so they kind of know it and they get it. But
Mhm.
it's often helpful to have somebody, like that, a professional. Many of the postpartum doulas take special lactation classes. I took one also, but it's like
Mhm.
not, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that because I'm just
Mhm.
coming in, right after
Mhm.
baby is born. So, but still, all of that. And yes, unfortunately, it's not covered by insurance right now. So,
Mhm.
and even midwives to some degree are not covered by insurance. It depends who they are, how they're hooked up, what,
Mhm.
group they're in. If they're in with doctors, they might be. If they're not and they're on their own, they may not be, or I don't know, or some have just decided not to take insurance.
Mhm.
Um, there's different scenarios. So I don't know what it's like in Pennsylvania, but
It's funny that they don't take insurance for the things that we actually need, you know?
well,
Uh,
there's a lot of, stuff that goes on with insurance that's not great either, that causes a lot of problems. I can I can attest to that.
mhm.
Trying to deal with insurance companies is not easy, you know.
Right. Mhm.
So they're trying to get out of paying for your services a lot of the time, so they deny the claims.
Mhm.
Um, and maybe just some people, I know in my profession, people just get fed up with it and they just stop taking insurance. In my case, I take insurance out of network for my, acupuncture.
Mhm.
Herbology is not something that's covered under insurance. No state has that. But
Mhm.
the doulas, we did have a pilot program here in New York State for Medicaid, but it hasn't gone through the legislature here to have coverage. So, and it probably would be Medicaid first if it was to happen at all.
Mhm.
But at this point in time, there isn't anything.
Mhm.
So you got to save your pennies. I mean, if this is what you know,
Right.
really want to do, it's something you're going to have to think about expending for.
Mm.
I personally think it's totally worth it, but not everybody, like you said, not everyone can afford it.
Mhm.
It just depends, what
Yeah, I
you
guess it
want.
does. Yeah, because some women, some people, some women, some of us, I don't think I haven't went through it, but some women have postpartum depression.
Yes.
And it's good to have someone there after they give birth or someone to come visit the home
Hmm.
and check on them, if
Hmm.
they're going through postpartum depression. I think that would be another thing that would be good for postpartum
Yes.
pregnancies.
Yes. So we are also trained in sort of seeing some of the signs, and I took an extra course in it for that PPD, it's postpartum depression, and to kind of look and ask some questions about how mom is feeling. Now, there's a normal thing about the hormones changing and coming down, and mom feeling more weepy. But if she's like not getting out of bed and she's feeling very detached from the baby, or if she says she starts having like thoughts that the baby, that she's going to injure the baby, or that's definitely red flags that there is something going on more than just normal hormone fluctuation.
Mhm.
um, Sometimes it's hard to tell, it doesn't creep up necessarily right away.
Mhm.
That's why I hope that pediatricians are getting a little bit more aware, because like mom is going to be now focused on the baby. So who's the first one that's getting seen? It's usually after that, it's the baby, the baby to the doctor to get weighed and just make sure everything's good. But they need to be looking at the mom at the same time, asking her questions about how she's functioning. So,
Right. Yeah.
Yes, that's important. And again, like I said, I have resources of like an individual psychiatrist who I have been trying to work with now to team up to provide the service if people need it. Or we also have here on Long Island, it's a Long Island Postpartum Resource Center. So they can also give out information for referrals if people need it. And that's important, just to have those names or those kinds of resources available, have somebody to talk to. They actually have a hotline. They have a, so I don't know in Pennsylvania, maybe if there's something like that that's hooked up with the state, or I don't know, just a local organization. So that's something that's important to have. And I think we're more aware of that now, coming out of the pandemic and people having a lot of anxiety and depression, and now focusing on postpartum.
Right.
So, but there are different grades of what postpartum depression is. It can be, real severity. Those are the ones that kind of, you hear on the news where the mom unfortunately kills the baby or something. Those are very, very unusual. Those usually, it's not a high percentage. But in the middle, you might have somebody who's, got sort of a mild to moderate kind of symptoms of it, or somebody who is sort of more moderate to severe and they need to be on medication, basically. That,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you also are a herbalist.
Herbalist.
And so is that an alternative type of treatment instead of using actual prescription medication? Is that what you use to treat
Yes.
patients?
Yes. So, I mean, sometimes, of course, people come in with already being on medication. My ladies that I help with fertility, if they're not doing medication hormone treatment, they often will do herbal treatments with me in formulas. So we don't usually do just one single herb. And then depending on what's going on, I may or may not be able to do herbs if they're doing what they call stimulation cycle, which they're usually getting, again, hormone drugs. So some doctors are okay with it. Some reproductive endocrinologists are okay with it. Others are not. So I have to stop doing the herbs. But the herbs can be used for many things, like blood pressure, to regulate your cholesterol, any gastrointestinal problems. I use it for anxiety and depression. Many, many uses for herbs. So again, some people want to, one of the big ones is PPIs, which are proton pump inhibitors, which are for people when they're having, acid reflux and stuff going on with their gastrointestinal system. And it's something called GERD, GERD. It's, so this is irritation in your esophagus and then into your stomach, all that.
Yeah.
And so I can get people a lot of times to get off those, because those drugs are not really supposed to be on for very long anyway. Really only supposed to be on those drugs for a couple of weeks, but people stay on them for years. And what happens is it's imbalancing the pH in your stomach. So I try to get them, so, with the blessing of their doctor. I can't just tell anyone to stop taking medication. That's not within my license to do that. I just say, hey, talk to your doctor. We're going to try this. We're going to do some supplementing with something. Let's see if we can get you down on this medication. Same thing with blood pressure medication. Even
depression. How about depression medication? Is that the same?
Yeah.
Because those medications, they have, not to cut you off, I'm sorry, but
it's okay.
Those medications have side effects.
Yes.
Especially depression medications, like it affects your libido. Like you don't have interest in sex anymore.
Right.
When you take depression medication for a long period of time. I know it did for me. And the last couple of guests that I had, his name was John Giordano. He's a expert in addiction. And he was saying that, a lot of people don't know about the alternative medications that you can use instead of using prescription drugs, because, prescription drugs have a lot of side effects.
Yes.
Like, I don't like, for me, I don't want to lose my libido. I still want to have sex.
Yeah, sure,
So, so I have to look into, now I'm looking into alternative medicine
Mhm.
to replace
Mhm.
what I'm taking now.
Right. So if somebody comes into me with that request, again, I can't say, oh, I can't tell them to go off on their medication, but
Right.
we can work together to maybe titrate it down so they're not taking as much of it. And also by doing this is where acupuncture and herbs come together well. So acupuncture is cumulative, so we need to do it on a weekly basis for a certain amount of time until the effects kick in, right? So
Mm-hmm.
that we do that, and then in between, then I can start supplementing with a formula, or even sometimes with supplements. Okay, so these are not medications; these are natural substances that I'm giving them, whether
Okay.
they're herbs or something else that's like more like over the counter you might get, but they're basically herbs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes vitamins, but yes, so maybe we can work on something where, it depends on the level of severity.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand from the Western medical perspective now they're doing more like cocktails. It's not just like one drug they're giving somebody, which apparently works better. But then, of course, like you're saying, you might end up having more side effects. So we can mitigate those side effects
Mm-hmm.
because when we're doing a formula, the herbs together are helping to do that themselves when they work, eat the herbs in a formula. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we can do that. We can help somebody, and then we have to do our own work in diagnosing. So I have to kind of know what's going on with you. We do it from a Chinese medicine perspective to create what we call a pattern diagnosis based on organ systems. So that's another whole
Mm-hmm.
talk. But that, yes, you can do that. I'm not going to say I've ever had anybody completely come off um, Western medication for any kind of, mental health disorders, but that doesn't mean that they can't. Some people are afraid. They don't really want to come off of them because they know what they were like before they were on them. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of like it's hard to get them to make that change, but they see the benefit of how the acupuncture calms down their nervous system. It makes them more focused,
Mm-hmm.
makes them, changes their energy, like they'll get more energy. All those things are like really important that a pill can't give you,
Can
really.
do. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's a combination, I think, in a lot of respects. Sometimes you have to kind of work with them both together. So even though their desire may be to get off completely, and some people
Mm-hmm.
may be able to, we also
Mm-hmm.
can talk about nutrition. Nutrition is very important and what you're actually eating
Mm-hmm.
that can help your nervous system and and your brain. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
those are all parts of a whole that
Right.
have to be taken together. And of course, Western doctors don't really talk about that too much.
Well, that's
And
because
yeah,
they don't want us to come off the prescription medications. You
it's
know, this
it's that,
country,
yeah.
this country is, I think the United States is the biggest legal drug company that's here, right now. I mean, because they would prefer to have us on prescription drugs than for us to do natural, holistic type of alternative medications.
Hmm.
You know, like you were saying, if you're somebody who's been on depression medication for a long period of time, and it's working for you, and you want to do something natural, you kind of do get scared of, because you have to be weaned off of, if you've been on it for so long, you have to be weaned off of it. You can't just come right off of it. So how do you transition somebody from uh coming from prescription drugs to herbal drugs?
Well, they
You,
have to,
you have to do it together?
yeah, and I don't necessarily talk to the doctor. You have to there's the advocate word. You have to advocate for yourself and go back to
Mm,
your doctor and say, look, I'm working with an herbalist or, whatever, licensed acupuncturist. I'd like to try to do some, therapy with that. Can, you work with me in terms of maybe lowering my medication and help me with this to monitor how I'm doing? Because
mm-hmm.
I cannot monitor, again, the Western medication. That's You're
Right.
going to need the doctor for that. But you bring it to them because if
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to suggest it, and look, some are going to be open to it
Right.
and others are not.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then I would say maybe find another doctor. So,
Mm-hmm.
that's part of the piece right there. So first you got to advocate for yourself and ask the person, I'm sorry, the doctor, can you work with me on this? And they might ask, well, why do you want to do this? Well, then you got to come up with your argument as to why you want to do this. Well, my libido is down. I don't have good energy, or whatever it may be. I don't know. But
Mm-hmm.
you say, well, we could give you something else for that. Like, no, I
Mm-hmm.
don't want another drug. What I want is for my body to function more naturally.
Right, exactly.
And I can do that, I think, if I do more natural substances,
Mm-hmm.
that somebody who, like me, is more experienced in knowing how to give you those formulas. And can we try that?
Right, right.
I mean, that's what you have to do, basically.
Yeah,
You have
yeah,
to stand up for yourself.
that's
That's
true.
the only way it's gonna work.
Yeah.
And don't buy into that they're gonna give you another drug, or they want to
Mm-hmm.
you on. I mean, again, this is all dependent on what's going on. There's some people that have severe issues,
Mm-hmm.
very severe mental illness. I'm not talking necessarily about those people coming off their medication, but
Mm-hmm.
you know what? You can always do and add other things
Mm-hmm.
that are gonna make you feel good, that are
Right,
gonna make you function better. I don't mean
right.
just feel good, I'm talking about really feeling alive and functioning better,
Right, right. Yeah, because
That's
you want to feel your natural self. You don't want to,
right.
because a lot of these medications, like you said, they so quick to add some more medication on top of the medication they already given you. And a lot of that medication does have side effects. It numbs your body. It does it. I know for me, it just lowered my libido, and I'm in the process of getting that fixed now, because, I want to be more natural. I don't want these side effects that come
Mhm,
with taking medications.
mhm. Yeah, so you're doing your own advocacy work, which is important, and then
Yeah.
just start researching who is in your area, who
Mm-hmm.
has maybe some experience with that. You don't wanna just go to anyone. Like, you just wouldn't go to any Western doctor, so you wouldn't go to any herbalist unless maybe they have some experience. So some of us,
Right.
like, we specialize too. I mean, I have a
Mm-hmm.
general practice. I do pain management. I do, asthma and gastrointestinal stuff. And then, of course, my specialty is fertility. But we all
Mm-hmm.
kind of have a kind of idea of what's going on with the full body. But you want
Mm-hmm.
somebody maybe who has that more, has worked with people with psychological issues, and maybe they know what to do
Right.
specifically. I mean, we're all trained in the basics, let's just say, but then we all, kind of go into different areas. So
Mm-hmm.
that's, and then if I can just get to, like, why I wrote this book, I'll just
Yeah,
put
let's talk about that book. What is the name of the book?
so Unleash Your Inner
Alicia.
Goddess: How to Experience an Empowering Pregnancy, Labor, and Birth.
Okay.
And so I put in this book my experiences. Like I said, I put in my own personal experience of how I was with my pregnancy, and I told you a little bit about what happened. I had to have a cesarean. My son was in a full breech presentation, and which was not the birth that I wanted. I had a midwife, but ended up having, an OB do a cesarean section on me,
Mm,
and I didn't have a lot of support. And even back then, 1999 was when my son was born. There wasn't, this sort of postpartum doula type thing, or I did have a lactation consultant, which I paid for, of course,
mhm,
but it wasn't enough. And my mother was only able to come for a week because she was still working. And
mhm,
my mother didn't breastfeed because in the time period that she grew up, they were pushing formula on women, so that
mhm.
she didn't do breast. So she knew nothing, like, really about how to promote that and everything. That was not her fault. It's just she wasn't educated in it.
Right.
So very different today. There's a lot more support in terms of Facebook page groups and other groups you can join, and so much more. Obviously we have all this technology that can be helpful,
Mhm.
which you and I didn't have when we were having kids. So
Nope.
you
Yeah.
kind of had to rely on yourself, or maybe a friend or a family member. And that's
Mhm.
what also a doula is there for, because you may not have people around you. You don't have family members who can be there, um, to help you labor. Like, way back, that was the matriarch's job, is to kind of help the other women in the group to help
Mhm.
birth. They'd be there to hold your hand and get you a glass
Mhm.
of water, and rub your back, and and
Mhm.
that's what we do. That's what we're doing as a doula. And
Right.
why? Because look what's happened to our society. It's changed. We're more fractured. We don't live together as much as we used to. So,
Right.
and I talk about that in the book. And then what I also added was these female archetypes of goddesses, and trying to get women back to this idea that we are strong and we are powerful, and we have this wonderful gift that we have if we choose to use it to birth and to have, have babies and create other human beings, which is pretty incredible. And that's just showing in these characters of goddesses. And what I did was I took a couple of them and put the stories in of women who I had supported.
Mm-hmm.
So showing, how I thought this one was like an Aphrodite, or this one was like a different one. And
Mm-hmm.
most of these goddesses are sort of fertility, harvest related. That's what a lot of them are, but they could have other aspects, like Rihanna, who is, the great warrior and has a lot of courage. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if the singer Rihanna had, I mean, she seems to have a lot of those qualities, but
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know if that's why she was called that, but that is an actual mythical goddess, that's she's a pretty strong woman.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
a
she's
couple
from
of
the
them,
Bahamas, so she's a what do they call it?
Bohemian.
Bahamian.
Yeah,
She's from the Rihanna's from the Bahamas, so
yeah,
they're strong women.
yeah. Okay. I don't know too many of them. Maybe you know a few more, but yeah, I could imagine,
Right.
So, understanding that we have these ideas and these myths that have gone through the years. We use these myths for a reason, that
Mm-hmm.
they're to help prop women up and to help show. I mean, way before Western society and way before a lot of societies were matriarchal. It was the woman who was the head of the government, or the tribe, or whatever you want to call that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And did all the decision making.
Mm-hmm.
It has only changed in probably the last, I guess 3,000 years or something, but way before that. So, from biblical times or whenever went forward, it was all very patriarchal, right? Even
Right.
if you look at, and look, I'm not a biblical scholar, but I had read it. But, anyway, there's a change there that happened. And I think
Right.
that's what we're trying to get back to. And I think that women have been dispossessed and, you know, dumbed down, and we
Mm-hmm.
need to get that back,
Yeah.
and a
Yeah.
lot of things are happening that are not good in hospitals. As you know, I just wanted to bring this out, which I'm sure you're aware of the amount of, the women maternal mortality rate is not great in the United States. And why is that? We were supposed to be one of the most technologically advanced medical countries in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one, women are not being listened to. Two, there's just too much intervention on some level, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where we need to take back that power,
Mm-hmm.
It's just don't leave that hospital until somebody gives you an answer,
Right.
or
Right.
get somebody who knows what the heck they're talking about, because
Mm-hmm.
you can ask questions, and
Right.
you don't leave the hospital until, or you leave the hospital if you think they've been doing too many tests or whatever, and they're not coming up with the diagnosis. I mean, there's other scenarios that we can talk about, but
Mm-hmm.
um with in terms of birthing, moms have, I know I've seen these reports of women going, and of course we have this whole abortion issue now, but women going into hospitals and not being listened to. Like you're telling, in your gut how you feel,
Mm-hmm.
whether you're pregnant or not. That something is not right
That's
when,
right.
and if somebody's not listening to you, like, move on to the next, get somebody else in that room that's going to listen to what you're saying,
Yeah,
and
because everything is so set up systematically, like you
that's
said.
right.
It's all, everything is about, okay, it's hurry up, get this person out, bring the next person in, put her out, bring the next, it's like a system thing. It's not like they're not concerned about the individual personally.
And
Uh,
look, there's a lot of good doctors out there that really want to do the right thing. That's why they
right.
went into the profession.
Yeah.
Um, you start with an altruism that you want to be the right person and do the right thing and help people. And I think
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways, doctors do feel like that. Unfortunately, they're stymied by, the processes that the hospital imposes upon them. But,
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
it's not just them. It's
Right.
it's the whole
The whole,
thing,
right,
whole
right.
structure.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
that's what
Yeah.
again, what we were talking about at the top is just ask those questions, and
Mm-hmm.
know your rights. And, and then I put in here just some things about different procedures. Know what those procedures are,
Mm-hmm.
again, before you even go into the hospital. What is an epidural? And, what is, they do a thing now to get sort of labor going, which is the scraping of the lining of the cervix.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and do you really need that? Even, midwives do it too. It's not just the OBGYNs, but
Right.
knowing what these things are, that they're going to say, oh, we're going to do this now. And you're going to be like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? What is,
Right. Right.
like, I don't want anything down there that we don't
Right.
need. Okay.
At least
So,
explain to me what you do.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
And,
true.
this thing of also doing, exams while you're pregnant, and then when you're birthing, well, not while you're pregnant, but when you're birthing,
Mm-hmm.
that they want to do cervical exams. And I would say just make that as minimal as possible. You hopefully didn't have a lot if you had a midwife with one of them, because they don't really believe in doing a lot of cervical exams. It's like
Right.
they want to know where they're at, like how many centimeters are you now,
Mm.
and how much are you effaced? And it's like, just chill out and let
Right.
this happen.
Right.
That's what birth needs. Birth needs time.
Right. Right.
It just needs time, and sometimes you just don't want to give it to you, but you got to take it. You got to say,
Mm-hmm.
if again, but going back to the epidural, if you really need it, then you get it. But maybe
Mm-hmm.
you say, you know what, I think I want to hang out. Maybe I can hold on. I'm doing okay. I just
Mm-hmm.
come back in an hour, and I'll
Right.
see how I feel then. You're allowed to
Right.
say that. You don't have to say yes or no. You
Mm-hmm.
know.
And
So
that's
that's
good that I'm glad you're sharing that with my audience, because that's good that, they know that they have options, because
yeah.
when you give birth, a lot of times you don't think you have options. You just go with what they tell you to.
Hmm.
They come in your room, oh, we're going to give you an epidural. You don't know if you have to take that epidural or not. You don't know if you can say no or not. You think to yourself, I know for me, I thought that when they offered it to me, when I was giving birth, I thought that was something I had to do. I didn't know that there was options where I could say, no, I don't want an epidural. Let me just try to go through this on my
Hmm.
own
Yeah.
naturally,
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And I don't know why this was, but I did like an internship at one of our big hospitals here. And is again through Long Island Doula Association. It was a great experience. Excuse me, because you got to see a lot of women.
mm-hmm,
So, you know, all different situations, but many women who are from certain ethnic groups, many Spanish backgrounds, they did not want an epidural. They would just labor and labor and take it, and
mm-hmm,
it was very, in a lot of ways that is courageous, but it's also their culture, it's their headspace. Like, they are already prepared, they know
mm,
it, and they're
right,
ready to deal with it.
mm-hmm,
If you are not ready to deal with it,
mm-hmm.
what's going to happen when you get into the hospital?
You're just going to accept what they offer you,
That's it.
you know? So, yeah. Well, this was an interesting conversation. I'm glad you gave out this good information, because, now a lot of people who don't know that now that they have options.
Hmm.
We have a say so when it comes to our bodies,
Yeah,
you know.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, because they trying to, it's crazy how this country is, and now they at the point now where in some states you ain't even allowed to have abortions now. They're telling you you have to have the baby,
Hmm.
you know.
It's
And
just it's a misunderstanding of really how the woman's body works, and how there could be so many different scenarios. It's not so cut and dry as, legislators or people who are, uh, even whatever. If you're thinking about it from a Christian point of view, or whatever you're coming from,
mhm,
it's not so easy. The woman should have the ability to make the decision, also given the information that she's given from the doctors as to, let's say, the viability of that baby, or how their health would be impacted
mhm,
if they were to birth that baby,
mhm.
as that recent case of that woman um, in Texas. So, there's just a lot of different things there that
Yeah,
you just can't make it black and white. It just doesn't work
exactly.
like that,
It don't work. I never understood how people, I never could understand how the government could make decisions on somebody's body.
Mhm,
Like, I mean, this is my body. How are you going to tell me what to do with my body? You know,
mhm,
we have so many more major issues going on in this country that we should be concerned about than to be concerned about whether or not I want to keep my baby or not. Because, like you said, you don't know what my medical condition is or what my financial situation may be, or, you know, it's a lot of, like you said, it shouldn't be so cut and dry like that. And
mhm.
unfortunately, this is the country we live in. So, hey, what are we going to do?
You gotta fight back. You just
Yeah,
gotta
that's what
try to
we
keep
got to
fighting
do.
back.
Got to fight back, you
Yeah,
know, and,
get educated, like, buy something like my book or, you can go to Amazon and get it.
okay.
It's a bestseller, right?
Oh,
But yeah,
congratulations.
yes. So, just whatever you need to do to educate yourself, so that
Okay.
if you're ever put in that situation, you have some ideas about what to do and
Right. Yeah.
defend yourself a little bit, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. Yep. Okay, well, thanks a lot, Sharon, for popping in. I don't want to keep you too long because I know you got a patient pretty soon.
No. But, I do consultations on the phone. I'll offer that today if somebody wants a free 15-minute consultation. They can do that and, you know, I can maybe give them a little bit of information or advice as to what they're looking for.
Okay.
And maybe they can find somebody in your area or, depending on what the situation is.
All your information will be at the bottom of this interview, so
Okay,
they will be able to reach you,
great.
you know, if
Hmm.
they need to contact you in regards to any kind of consultation or anything.
Yeah,
So,
right. Because I can do an herbal consultation by Zoom. It's not a big deal. So,
okay. Okay, Sharon, thanks again. I
okay,
appreciate you
thank
coming
you.
on.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
for the audience, make sure you guys like and subscribe and hit the notification button so you can be notified for the next episode of Let's Talk About This.